Hi, Lawrence LeBrocq, Managing Partner of Garces, Grabler, and LeBrocq. Welcome to Victim to Victory, Triumph Over Tragedy. Today I have the pleasure of having a top neurosurgeon here with me, Dr. Gabriel Hunt. Doctor, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into neurosurgery, tell me a little bit about your background, where you came from, and what happened in your life to guide you or gear you towards neurosurgery? Because it's not every day that you talk to a neurosurgeon.
Very true, very true. I guess I'll start probably a little bit about my upbringing and where my parents were from. So my mother was born in the Bahamas, and my father was born in St. Martin. And they both came over to the U.S. as kids and met somewhere in college, and then that was where it all began.
Right.
I'm the second child of three. My brother is a year younger than me, and my sister's a year older. And my journey started, I think, as far back as I can remember, when I was probably around 4 or 5. I remembered my father being in medical school, and I would actually go to school with him sometimes. He was in the lab, he was getting his PhD, and I would always love playing with the mice that he had that he was doing experiments on. And as a child, it was just fun for me. I really didn't know anything about it, but I got to spend some time with him. And unfortunately, when he was just finishing up his program, he diagnosed himself with leukemia.
Jeez.
And back in 1976 and 77, that was pretty much a death sentence. You know, if that happened at this point in time, we have the medicine that actually can prolong people's lives, and it's no longer a death sentence. But I remember specifically going to the hospital where he was spending a lot of time because of his disease, and just having a feeling of just helplessness. And even though I was, 5 years old at that time, I remember it like it was yesterday. And there are a lot of things in our lives that we can't remember from even our childhood. If I move a little forward and I talk about elementary school and high school, there are things in that time period that I don't remember as well as I remember just watching the Three Stooges with my dad and eating ice cream. Right. And it's as vivid as any other memory that I have in my life. I talked to my brother about this, and he has almost no recollection of that time, even though he was a year younger than me. So I remember seeing him in the hospital and just kind of seeing him decline. And I think it was very instrumental in me wanting to not just go into medicine, but just not being in a position in my life where I actually felt helpless.
Sure.
I felt like he was there hurting. He was there just kind of getting away from the man who I knew he was, and he was a shell of himself. And at that age, I didn't know anything about death and dying and what was going on. I just thought, my dad was in the hospital and he was sick, and he just couldn't come home and play like we usually did. So I remember, there being times when he was uncomfortable or he was in pain, and there was nothing that anyone there could do anything about. And he was just kind of suffering. So at that point in my life, I decided that I wanted to do something with my life that I could keep other people or even other kids from being in the same position that I was and feeling helpless in that way. Mm-hmm. So I never wanted to be in a position where I felt helpless again. So, people always ask, how did I decide to go into neurosurgery? Obviously, it's a lot more specialized than just saying I want to go into medicine. Right. But I was very fascinated with the brain just as a young kid. And people always ask me, well, what do you mean? How could you be fascinated in the brain? And it's a very good question because I didn't really know much about the brain, but it was kind of an intellectual pursuit. People would say, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I would say, I'm going to be a brain surgeon. They would be like, oh, that's so cute. That's so nice. You're such a cute little kid. And I grew up in Southern Florida. So, of course, growing up in Southern Florida in the 70s, I grew up in this town called Fort Pierce. And it's about 60 miles north of West Palm Beach on the East Coast. Right. The city that was just the next city over that was the city south was called White City. And realistically, there were still banners, there were still signs that would say no colors allowed after dark. And so that's the area where I grew up. When people always ask me, did I face a lot of racism when I was young, or did I face a lot of challenges, I would say that was the only life I knew.
Yeah.
So there was never a question of what are you going to do or how are you going to do it. My mother would always tell me, this is the goals I have for you. And they were very simple. They were, you're going to go to college And I don't care what you do. You can be a garbage truck driver, but you're going to be the most educated garbage truck driver there is, and maybe you'll own your own garbage business one day. Right. She never even talked to my brother and sister and I about going into medicine. But I was always fascinated with just the mind and how it works. And when I got actually old enough to start liking girls, it was always fascinating to me to try and figure out what they were thinking. And I still can't understand. Right. That's something that,
you and I both.
is still very fascinating to me. And then just how the mind works. As I started going through high school and taking some anatomy classes and some psychology classes, I became more interested in the brain and just the psychology of things. So I went to undergrad at UCLA and I studied psychobiology because I was so interested in psychology, but I still had in the back of my mind that I wanted to do medicine and I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. So as I started learning more about the brain and the anatomy of the brain, I started getting a little more intrigued into being able to get to the point in my life where if I'm good at what I do, I can help the body ultimately take care of itself. Not that I'll be playing God, but just that I'm giving that person the ability to get better based on the level of skill that I have to actually get them through that acute period.
Sure. Well, let's go back now. Mm-hmm. You said your dad passed you around 6 then, is that correct?
Correct.
And you had an older sister and a younger brother, all within 3 years. Had to have been tough on your mom. How did your mom raise 3 kids in Fort Pierce, Florida, by yourself?
That's a good question. And, looking back on a lot of the things that my mom did and a lot of things that she taught us, I understand now. But as a kid going through it, I could not understand. So after my father died, my mother would always say that she wanted to do things that made her happy. So my mom had multiple degrees. She could have gotten numerous jobs that paid her a lot of money. And she would always tell us, you guys will understand one day that you have to do things that you love and that make you happy, and you don't do it for the money. And so we would always be like, Mom, we want this Coca-Cola sweatshirt. I'm dating myself. Or we want these Nike shoes or these Pumas or something. And we would never get what we wanted all the time because we couldn't afford it, but we always had what we needed. Right. And going through it, I could never understand just the thought behind that. I would say, well, Mom, why can't you go get this job and make this extra money so we can get this? And she would always point out to us that this material thing isn't as important as once your needs are taken care of, all these wants that you have, if you have to do something that you don't enjoy doing to get those, is it really worth going after? And that was something that's stuck with me my whole life. And when I tell people that, they say, well, you're a neurosurgeon, so what do you mean? Aren't you doing this for the money? And I tell people, I say, listen, if you want to go into medicine for the money, then you're going to it for the wrong reason. And you'll hear people actually say that, but I don't think people practice what they preach, because I have a lot of colleagues that are doing this solely because they're making the money that they make. And I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, like, oh, would you do this for free? It's so funny that, so my brother is an orthopedic spine surgeon, and my sister is a family medicine physician. So we all ended up going into medicine. And one of the goals that my brother and I had for ourselves was that at some point we wanted to be in a position financially that we could do neurosurgery, orthopedics, and family medicine as a hobby and not actually have to charge people for doing the things that we do. And that's still a goal that we've been actually working towards. And one of the big things that I'm most proud of is my brother and I started a foundation called the Hunt Foundation. And the way that all came to fruition as soon as it did was because after the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, we got on the phone and we tried to call everybody that we could to say, hey, here's an orthopedic surgeon and here's a neurosurgeon. Just tell us where we can come so that we can actually help you guys. We don't want any money. We'll donate some money, but we want to donate our time. And a couple of agencies told us, absolutely not. We don't want you to come. And so we were kind of bewildered because we were thinking, we're giving you our time. I mean, we know you need neurosurgeons and orthopedists, but yet you're telling us you don't want our business. You don't want us to come for free. And so after that, we decided, you know what? Why don't we just start our own foundation that we'll have control over, that will allow us to provide the care that we want for other people without having to ask permission to just do good.
Sure.
And so our foundation, the Hunt Foundation, was born from that.
Wow. And what have you done with the Hunt Foundation thus far?
So when we initially started, we thought that we wanted to use our skills in orthopedic surgery and neurosurgery to actually go to underserved populations around the world and help them. We actually started over in the west coast of Africa, a place called Gabon, and then we also went to Ethiopia. The biggest problem that we found was that even if we went there and asked to give our services and donate things, there was so much red tape that you would get from the countries themselves just to be able to go in and actually help their people.
Right.
We also are so subspecialized that, unlike a lot of other physicians where you can go to a village and give them medicines and you can do little procedures, our procedures have to be done in a hospital.
Yeah.
So we looked at how can we affect the most people's lives and use our money to best help the most amount of people. And so we've gone to Ethiopia and we've taken a week and operated on, 15, 20 people and affected those lives. But we thought, how can we take that same money that we spent, bringing our team over and equipment and time and effort in the hospital, and use that money to affect more lives? And we thought, God, if we just spent that money and bought mosquito nets in Ethiopia, we could actually save more lives than we did just by improving the lives in 20 people.
Right.
So we've looked at doing other projects with orphanages and other things in education to try and have a larger impact on that continent in and of itself.
That's incredible. So tell us a little bit about the journey. You grew up in Florida, went to school in UCLA. Where did you go to medical school?
So I went to undergrad and medical school at UCLA.
Okay. So then did you practice medicine out in California? Or?
Yeah, so after I graduated from medical school there, I went to Thomas Jefferson in Philadelphia to complete my residency in neurosurgery. And then after that, I went back out to Los Angeles, where I worked at Cedars-Sinai for the past 20 years.
And when you say you're a neurosurgeon, explain to our guests, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm in the injury business. You're in the business of fixing people that are injured. But explain what neurosurgery actually is.
So neurosurgery encompasses everything in the skull and the spinal cord and spinal column and the peripheral nerves. So anything in the nervous system. Initially, when I finished for about the first 5 years, I focused more on intracranial pathology, where I was taking care of tumors, aneurysms, hemorrhages, all those things that are in the intracranial space, and devoted a little bit of my time to the spine. As I got a little further out, I spent more time dealing with just spinal disorders. One, because my brother is an orthopedic spine surgeon, so it afforded us the ability to work more together. And so we developed ourselves as Hunt Spine out in Los Angeles. And outside of just enjoying just taking care of patients and seeing the smiles on their face, I truly enjoy being in the operating room with my brother because he's my best friend.
Right.
And so what better way to actually spend your day than doing what you love, but then also being able to do it alongside someone that you admire, that you trust, that you know is different from you, but the same in the regards to how you treat patients. So I think one of the most incredible things that I enjoyed was we'll be in an operating room and nothing is ever textbook. So, you go and see something for the 1,000th time and you actually see something different. You see something new. And I think the difference between a good surgeon and a great surgeon is being able to improvise immediately when you see something happen. So I think that the reason why a lot of times our patients did so well is because whenever we operated on someone, it wasn't just me in there working. It was actually the two of us there, probably on 99% of the cases, where there were times when we would look at each other, something would happen, we'd look at each other, and just for that look, we'd both be thinking, oh man, like what in the world's going on? So without letting everybody else in the room know, we would kind of go over and look at the films and we kind of think about it and think about how are we going to get out of this problem. And then one of us would say, oh, I got it. And it was almost like two dance partners that one overcorrects for the other one's mistake, or not even a mistake, but just being able to know that I trust this guy inherently. So if he has an answer, then we're good. Let's go. And then as soon as he starts doing it, I'm like, Now I see what's going on. Right. So it was almost like, we describe it as like dancing the tango. There's one person's leading, the other one's following, and that can happen numerous times within the case. And you can only do that with someone that you have a good relationship with, that understands what's going on and that you trust has the knowledge to make those decisions.
So what is the difference between, and it's probably very subtle, but the difference between an orthopedic spine surgeon, because an orthopedist could work on shoulders, ankles, all extremities, different joints, from a neurosurgeon when you're working on the spine? Obviously, a neurosurgeon works on the brain as well, but if you have an orthopedic spine surgeon and a neurosurgeon, what is the difference in techniques when you're working on the spine?
So I think that there's a lot of differences and a lot of similarities. And the reason why I can speak so intelligently about it is because I've worked alongside my brother for 20 years. Right. And so I was there from day one up until now, where we've both grown, but the difference is in training. So I spent 6 years in training doing both brain and spine surgery, whereas when he was in his orthopedic training for 5 years, he may have spent 3 or 4 months focusing on the spine because he had to focus on everything else. Sure. Then afterwards, he spent a year focusing on the spine, where in those 6 years where I was working on the spine, I might have done 2,000 cases, and he might have done probably 10% of that in all of his training. So when we both got out and we're both working together, I felt a lot more confident working on the spine because I had done a lot more cases than he had, and it's just that repetition, just like anything in life. When you put in more time, you feel more comfortable doing things, and there's things that are reflexive to me, which he hadn't actually learned yet. So when we're dealing with the spine, neurosurgeons approach the spine, and we're thinking about the spinal cord and the nerves, and how do we decompress them, and how do we make sure that everything is functioning appropriately. So from the orthopedic standpoint, they are more concerned about the biomechanics of the spine. So back in the day, a lot of times neurosurgeons and orthopedists would work together, but the neurosurgeon would come in and do the decompression, then he would leave, and then the orthopedist would come in and do the fusion with the instrumentation. Right. And that's kind of how it all worked. Now, each of the specialties do both of them. So I think there's a huge discrepancy in regards to how things are done immediately when both are out of training, because the neurosurgeons obviously feel a lot more comfortable around the spine and around the neuroelements because we've just done it for a longer period of time and focused only on the spine versus focusing on everything else.
So do you still work with your brother? To take us from California, obviously now we're shooting in New Jersey, and I know you just opened up your own office here in Montclair, New Jersey. So tell us a little bit about that.
Very interesting question, and I'll kind of make it brief. I'll give you the abridged version. The most important thing to me is family. And one of the big reasons why I actually chose to come to New Jersey was because my son was playing competitive soccer, and we were all interested in moving to Europe for him to play. And so, of course, I can't practice neurosurgery in Europe, so I was trying to find places that I could go here in the U.S. to actually come back, work for a week or two, and then join my family in Europe. To allow him to play soccer. So I went a couple places. We ended up selling our house. We ended up making the decision that we were going to go. My former partner, he actually trained with me in residency. And so we had a discussion. He was kind of like, hey, why don't you come out here and work with me a little bit, then you can go across the water to Europe, spend with your family, and come back and forth. So we put a plan in motion for that to happen. And midway through all of that, my son was like, I think I want to be a neurosurgeon. But the plan was already in motion. And since my wife is from Pennsylvania and we both were kind of, I wouldn't say tired of Los Angeles, but it was just kind of time for a change. Sure. We decided to make that change. The great thing about it now is that my kids are like, why didn't we move sooner? And I was like, life doesn't work that way. But I'm very glad that I moved. And the only thing that I am a little remorseful about is just being able to spend that much time with my brother in the operating room.
Sure. Is your brother still out in L.A.? He
is. He's single in Los Angeles, and he doesn't like the cold.
Okay.
So I've been trying to get him to make some decisions to come over this way, and I think I almost got him. I think he's thinking about it a little bit because I think he's getting his license over here. So I keep my fingers crossed.
Well, that'd be good. But in this day and age, he could have a medical practice in L.A. and one over here in New Jersey as well, if you really wanted to. So
exactly. It's a lot of traveling back and forth, but I do get back about once a month to do things over there, and we're going to try and do things sort of on both coasts.
You're going to have to get the Hunt jet and just fly back and forth there. That's it.
Well, just, we'll see if you let me borrow yours.
So I love the philanthropy, but I want to go back to when you're 6 now, because a lot of kids go the other way. But now you have 3 children that lose their father at 7, 6, and 5. And you have a strong mom, obviously, who instilled some great work ethic in you. But what was it that made you and your 2 siblings strive and become overachievers and not let the loss of your dad just destroy your lives?
I think we were afraid of my mom. We thought she was a little crazy. No, all joking aside, I actually don't know the answer to that, because I'll always tell my friends that in the area where I was, they actually named Fort Pierce at one point the crack capital of the world. So I had friends that were in high school that were driving, Porsches and, all these expensive cars, and they would come to school with stacks of hundreds like this, and sometimes I couldn't afford $1 for lunch.
Yeah.
And I remember one time one of my friends asked me to deliver a package for him, and he told me that he would give me $5,000 to deliver this package to this house. And I wasn't an idiot. I knew what it was, but $5,000 to me then was like $1 million now. That was more money than I ever even heard of. Wow, that could help me pay rent for months and months to come. And I think that even though my mom was never a stickler about saying, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, I knew that I was so afraid that if she knew that I did that I don't know if my life would end or what I was really scared of, but I was just so terrified of disappointing her that kept me from doing it. And I don't know if my brother and sister felt the same way, or maybe if I would have gotten involved in that, then they might have followed suit. But to this day, I don't know why I truly said no that one time. And I think that was a pivotal point in my life where I think if I would have done that, it's a very slippery slope. If I would have done that and had money in my pocket, then I would have just done it again and just done it again. And this is the problem that a lot of kids fall into, is that, making money is so easy. This is the easy way. Why would I want to go to college? Why would I want to go to medical school? Why would I want to do something that looks like work when this guy over here has the fancy cars and the girls and the jewelry and the money? I can do that too. And as young boys, we all live that personal fable that, that's not going to happen to me. I'm going to be smarter than the next guy. He got put in jail or he got beat up or this happened. I'm smarter than that. That'll never happen to me. And I think everybody has said that, and obviously it doesn't happen that way.
Right. I have a funny story, or not that funny, but I was offered to run a package up from Florida when I was a kid. Now, I was probably 19, and my grandfather said to me, his son, he was very Italian, he says, "Hey, son, how much are they going to pay you?" And I said, 10 grand. He goes, "How much does a bullet cost?" I said, "I don't know, a couple dollars." He goes, "What do you think they're going to do? They're going to hand you 10 grand, or they're going to put a bullet in you and bury you?" He says, "What do you think?" I never forgot that either. So you have to be very, very careful. That easy money isn't always easy. And we know crack was big when I was younger and you were younger. And that can take down a lot of people. And to make money off of other people's suffering would be the complete opposite of what you're doing now with your philanthropic efforts. So.
But most people don't think of it that way. Most people are very egocentric, where they think about, what do I need right here, right now, versus what impact is this going to have on someone else's life?
Right.
What impact is this going to possibly have on my life? And yes, I might be hungry right now, but is doing this worth sacrificing maybe everything just for this one quick high, whether it's doing a drug, whether it's selling them, whether it's being involved in something that is a little shady and a little different. And what I see now is that as I've gotten older, gotten more educated, it's almost like the game is still the same, except it's just a little different. And so now, just as a spine surgeon, there are a lot of things that are presented to me that aren't really on the up and up, that are a little underhanded, whether it's doing inappropriate surgeries, whether it's doing an extra level, whether it's, doing something I shouldn't be doing that is attractive because of the money.
Right.
But then, you look at how does this affect the patient's life? It's illegal. So is that money that I'm going to make from that going to not come back and haunt me because I shouldn't be doing that? And I think a lot of people live that fable and they have that egocentric nature where they're thinking, psh, I'm bulletproof and no one's ever going to catch me, no one's ever going to find me. And they always do.
Yes, they always do.
You know, so ever since I was young, I was never in a position where I felt like money was so important that I'd be willing to do anything to get it. And unfortunately, most people think the other way.
Well, there's always a price to pay. Just like there's always a morning after. You know, it's like you're just on vacation for a week, but there's always the day after, and you have to be ready to pay for that. And people don't think about the consequences, unfortunately. Or this place would be a lot more guys like you doing good work for people, being a philanthropist, as opposed to taking the shortcuts.
Well, to use a very overused saying that everybody has heard, but people should do unto others what they would want done unto them. And when I speak to my patients, I tell them, I say, listen, you're not here for me to operate on you. You're here for me to actually help make you better. And if I wouldn't do the same thing to me, why would I do it to you? Right. And I kind of look at that patient as me sitting across from them talking to myself. And I would actually probably be a lot more aggressive with myself if I were speaking to myself than I would with patients. And that's only because I know the other side. I know the recovery. I know how things are going to go. But when you're sitting across from someone, talking to them about a surgery or just talking to them about what their problems are, you have to understand that they don't know anything about what you're saying. A lot of them have never had surgery before, so they're terrified.
Sure.
So the biggest downfall I think I see with a lot of other physicians, and not just surgeons, but just physicians in general, because medicine has become such a business, is it's all about, let me put in my few minutes of time to get this patient in and out, and then let's get the next client in. And I think that's taken away from the way medicine should be practiced. And it's sad because it's become such a business, and it's almost more so transactional than going back to the old days where you actually had doctors that made house calls. You know, in this day and time where hedge funds are buying up practices and expecting doctors to actually be busier and provide more services, I think just the lost art of treating people appropriately has become a thing of the past, unfortunately.
Well, now that you have your own business, and now you're going to have to balance being a business owner with the practice of medicine. How is that going so far, and what do you anticipate in the future?
Well, going back to when I actually owned my own business when I was in Los Angeles, my brother and I would see probably half as many patients a day as a lot of the other surgeons would, because the most important thing to me is actually being able to sit with patients and get a better understanding of what's going on. A lot of people will see a patient for 5 minutes, throw up a film, and say, oh, you need surgery. And a lot of times that's why a lot of people get surgery that's unindicated, because enough time isn't spent getting to the root of the problem to figure out what's going on. The thing I like about having my own practice is that there's no pressure, and it's not that there was ever pressure from above saying you have to do something or do more. It's just that inherent feeling like I'm not doing what I need to do in this practice to actually make my presence here be worthwhile, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Being in a position where I can decide whether I see 5 patients a day or 30 patients a day is a great feeling, because the business is going to take care of itself. And thank God, financially, that's never going to be an issue. And I would rather see less patients and provide better care than see more and it become more like just a business and me just have a mill where patients just coming in and out and we're thinking about making money.
Right. Now, you were talking about how important family is. We know your brother's in L.A. You're trying to drag him out here. You're living in New Jersey now, and your wife is from PA. Your son, you were talking about going to Europe and playing soccer, and then he said thinking about becoming a neurosurgeon. First, we'll start with your mom. How's your mom doing?
She's doing great. My mom's living her life. When I moved out to New Jersey, she wanted to move back to Florida because she doesn't like the cold either.
Okay.
So she's living in her place. She lives by a lake, and she goes for a walk every day, and the world is her oyster. She just comes in and out and comes back and forth to see the grandkids, and she's having a great time.
Wonderful. How about your son? What's he doing with himself now?
So he's going into his senior year at Ramapo here in Bergen County, and he's very excited about it. We're just going through the whole process now of thinking about schools and what he wants to do. He sounds like he's pretty pretty steadfast on his decision to want to go into neurosurgery. I'm kind of trying to talk him out of it. And people laugh when I say that because, even though it's an intellectual pursuit, I just want him to be happy.
Sure.
And I've really told him that I don't care what he does in life, and it's just the information that is passed down from my mom. Just do what makes you happy. And if you do what makes you happy, you'll never really work a day in your life because you enjoy it so much. Like when I was in residency, we would work 120 to 130 hours a week. And I would come in the morning at 4:30 whistling and singing, and people were looking at me like, it's 4:30 in the morning. Like, why are you so happy? Well, I was happy because I so enjoyed being there and doing my job. Yes, it was hard, but it makes life so much easier when you have to do something hard if you love it.
Sure.
So that's what I kind of passed down to him. I said, it's going to be hard, but would it be ultimately very flattering to me if I've set an example for you that you actually wanted to follow in my footsteps? But if that's not your path, that's okay. Just I'd rather you be happy and be around me and enjoy life than you wanting to just do neurosurgery just because that's what you've been exposed to.
So for fun, you like to snowboard. And how the hell does a guy from Florida living in Southern California for med school and practicing out there get involved in snowboarding? And what particular mountains did you love?
So I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie, and the things that I do now, my wife just kind of looks at me and just shakes her head because she's like, I just don't understand. I first went snowboarding when a buddy of mine and I were sitting in LA, and I had just mastered neurosurgery. And literally my logic behind it was, I've never been snowboarding before or skiing. I don't really have the money to do this, but my roommate at that time had a snowboard and some shoes, and they were actually a size too big for me, but what did I know? And so I said, well, I don't have to start my residency for 6 months. So if I break my arm, it'll heal by then. And that was literally my logic. So we went out, and one of my best friends, his name is Stephen DeBerry, and we just went on the mountain. Neither of us had snowboarded before. And we went on the bunny slopes, and they were a little hard. And so we said, well, let's go to the intermediate slope. And this was like our second run ever. I think we almost killed ourselves. I mean, he definitely almost killed himself. That was a rough one. And then my second experience was once I got to residency, I met my future wife then, and we thought it was going to be a very fun experience to go for my second time to the Poconos for New Year's Eve. And I swear we did one run, and it took us 4 hours to get down one run. I don't know how that made me fall in love with it, but
and it's so different skiing West Coast, East Coast, or snowboarding from powder to ice because you're
definitely is.
You're skiing on your edge, or you're snowboarding on your edge here on the East Coast.
But learning over here made it so much easier going back there, and I'm just very big on wanting to do things that are challenging that a lot of other people don't do. And so most of the people that I had experienced learning how to snowboard, they had learned when they were younger, or learned how to ski when they were younger. So here I am, close to my 30s, and just trying it for the first time. Everyone thought, oh, you shouldn't do that. You can hurt yourself. And so I was like, okay, well, it's a challenge for something that I want to do. And so that's literally how I am with every sort of aspect of my life in regards to challenges. When another crazy thing is that when I thought about going to neurosurgery and I was coming out of high school, I actually wanted to go into the Navy because I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And once again, it was one of those things where it was something that was challenging that not everybody else wanted to do. People wanted to go to the Navy or wanted to go to the Marines, but thinking about becoming a SEAL was something that was sort of, for most people, unattainable. Right. And then even with neurosurgery, that was one of the things where everybody in medical school, a lot of people would say, oh, I want to go into neurosurgery, but when it comes time to match, there's only 2 or 3 people in a class that still are on that path. So I've always been one of those people that want to do something for a challenge, and I like the process of it, not so much the reward at the end.
Well, Doc, what does the future have?
So the future is looking very bright. I just left my old practice. My buddy and I just decided that we would just kind of amicably split ways because we do things a little differently, and open up an office in Montclair, and just want to start a multidisciplinary program where we treat patients from a wellness perspective. Yes, deal with their spines, but then also look at injuries, not just car accidents, but injuries to kids in high school and college, and just want to treat the whole person and from a holistic approach, not so much just the surgical approach.
Well, that's great. I wish you very well with that. So if somebody wants to find you, Doc, give us your information.
Whew, that's a tough one because, like we talked about earlier, I don't have a huge following on social media, so I'm just now kind of getting into that. Our website is huntspine.com, and our foundation is thehuntfoundation.org. And that's the best way to find me at this point.
Well, thanks for coming down. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.